My name is Marcus Rivera, and 3 years ago, I was just another guy in a white apron, loading trays of stuffed mushrooms and folding napkins into swans. I didn't have a college degree. I didn't come from money. I didn't even have a bed frame. Just a mattress on the floor of a one-bedroom apartment I shared with my cousin. I was 29, broke, and tired, working 16-hour shifts at a catering company that barely knew my name. But I was good at it. I memorized every detail clients wanted before they even asked twice. I learned how to read a room better than a therapist. I kept my head down, my mouth shut, and my hands moving. That's what they liked about me. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud. I just got things done. That's probably why no one saw it coming when everything changed. It was a Friday night wedding at a private estate up in the hills, the kind with 3 driveways, a pool shaped like a violin, and guess who wore designer watches worth more than my entire life? I was stationed near the champagne tower, trying to keep the line moving, when a man in a navy suit and slicked-back hair walked over and said, "These are the best crab cakes I've ever had." I gave the usual smile and nod, ready to step aside, but he kept talking. "Did you make these?" I hesitated. "I prepped the fillings, sir." He leaned closer. "What's in it?" I rattled off the ingredients: lump crab, Dijon, cayenne, a little lemon zest. He raised an eyebrow. Impressive. Then he asked my name. Not to scold me. To remember it. "Marcus," I said, confused. He smiled. "I'm Owen Farley. Ever thought about doing more than this?" I didn't know what he meant, but that night changed my life. Owen was a venture capitalist. Rich, connected, and always on the hunt for the next story, as he called it. He said my flavors had soul. Said I had chef instincts. I told him I wasn't a chef. I was just a guy who knew how to stretch 5 ingredients into something you'd beg to eat again. He laughed. Even better. Within a week, I was standing in a glass-walled office overlooking downtown LA, pitching Owen and his partners on a gourmet meal prep startup. I had no slides. No numbers. Just samples. Owen called it scrappy brilliance. A month later, I was the co-founder of Plated Roots, a trendy new company delivering luxury meal kits infused with Latin flavors and street food soul. They put me in front of cameras. Gave me suits. Built a brand around me, the humble caterer turned culinary disruptor. My face was in magazines. I was doing TV interviews. I hired my cousin to manage logistics. Moved out of the apartment and into a downtown loft with exposed brick and an espresso machine I didn't know how to use. Within 6 months, we had 200,000 subscribers. A-list influencers were tagging us. Owen said we were going public in a year. I had equity. I was worth 8 figures on paper. I bought my mom a car, paid off her house, flew her to Miami for her birthday, and for the first time in my life, I thought, I made it. I thought I was safe, but I was wrong. Because when you climb that fast, you don't realize how shaky the ladder is until you're already off the ground. And no one tells you that the people holding it up, they have knives in their hands. The first sign should have been the warehouse move. Owen said we were scaling. Needed faster shipping, more automation. He brought in a new logistics team, people I didn't know. Said they were pros. A month later, I found out they replaced the organic ingredients we'd promised with cheap imports. I confronted Owen. He waved it off. "Margins, Marcus. You want to scale? You've got to cut costs." "But our whole brand is built on quality," I said. "It's built on you," he corrected. "Your face. Your story. People buy the dream, not the ingredient list." That was the first crack. Then came the second. An influencer accused us of using false advertising. Posted side-by-side photos of what we advertised versus what she received. The tweet went viral. Sales dropped overnight. I told Owen we had to respond, fix it, apologize. He disagreed. "Ignore it. She'll move on." They always do. But the customers didn't move on. And the press didn't, either. Then one morning, I came into the office and my keycard didn't work. My nameplate was gone. My access revoked. I called Owen. No answer. Later that day, I got an email from HR saying my shares were being frozen pending internal review. I wasn't fired. I was erased. Within a week, Plated Roots rebranded. They scrubbed me from the website, replaced my image with a faceless logo, and announced a new vision for modern dining. My cousin called me in a panic. He'd been let go too. No warning. Just a severance package and a silence clause. I went from millionaire to nothing in under 10 days. No cash, no job, no legal leverage. They'd written me out of my own success story. I had no lawyer, no MBA. I had crab cake recipes and a bleeding heart. And that's when I realized I wasn't the founder. I was the flavor, the face, the story they sold until they didn't need it anymore. And I wanted revenge. Not the petty kind, not a tweet. I wanted the kind of revenge that builds something real, something that no one can take from me again. And I was going to start from the same place I always had. The kitchen. This time, with fire in my hands. I spent the first few days after the collapse doing nothing but walking. No phone. No music. Just me and the city. I walked through Koreatown, past the food stalls where I used to sneak bites during late-night gigs. I walked past the old event halls I used to cater, where I used to haul bins of chafing dishes up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator never worked. I walked past alley dumpsters that once smelled like the end of my shift, and I remembered what real work felt like. The kind where you sweat not for equity, but for tips. And then, one night, I ended up back in front of the first kitchen I ever cooked in, El Taja, a tiny Mexican joint run by an old couple named Arturo and Lupe. I'd worked there when I was 17. They paid in cash, fed me more than they should have, and once gave me a cot in the storage room when my mom locked me out. I hadn't been back in over 10 years. The place looked exactly the same, a chip tile, faded paint, a neon sign that buzzed like a tired insect. I walked in. Arturo was at the counter, older, slower, but still sharp-eyed. He looked up and said, "Dios mío. Marcus." I smiled. "Long time, Jeef." He laughed, stood up, and hugged me. Then he said the thing that cracked something in me. "I saw you on the TV. You looked good, Mijo. You looked proud." I sat down at a booth that wobbled on one side and told him everything. The whole story. No edits. No ego. Just truth. He listened, never interrupting, just sipping from a chipped mug of cinnamon coffee. When I finished, he said, "They took your name, not your hands. You still know how to cook?" I nodded. "Then that's all you need." That night, I helped them close. Wiped down tables, emptied grease traps, diced onions until my eyes burned. I slept on the cot in the storage room again. Not because I had to, but because I needed to remember who I was before the money, the press, the betrayal. Over the next week, I kept showing up. Helping. Cooking. Cleaning. And then, one evening after we'd closed, Lupe turned to me and said, "Why don't you start here?" "Start what?" I asked. "Whatever comes next." That's when the idea hit. I didn't need a commercial kitchen or investors or branding firms. I just needed a grill, a name, and a reason. So I borrowed Arturo's busted food cart from the back of the storage shed, cleaned it with steel wool, re-welded one of the legs, and bought a cheap canopy from a flea market. Then I posted a flyer online. Back to the roots, Chef Marcus is cooking again. One cart. One night. First come, first fed. I didn't expect much. Maybe a dozen people. But when I rolled that cart out onto a sidewalk in Boyle Heights on a Friday night, there were already 30 people waiting. Someone had reposted the flyer. Word had spread. They brought cameras, phones, curiosity. And I served tacos. Not fusion. Not elevated. Just tacos. My grandmother's recipe. Braised beef, handmade tortillas, pickled onions with heat and sweetness. And I greeted every customer by name. Looked them in the eye. Thanked them. Because that was something Owen never understood. Food isn't just taste. It's memory. And by the end of that night, I had sold out. Made $430. More than I'd made in a week when I started catering. The next night, I doubled the prep. Sold out again. And the next weekend? There were people lining up 2 hours early. TikTok found me. Instagram lit up. They called it a comeback. A redemption arc. I didn't correct them. I just kept cooking. A few nights later, a woman waited until the line died down and then approached. She had a camera crew with her. "I'm from Channel 7, she said. "We'd love to do a feature." I paused, wiping sweat from my brow. "I'm not really looking for publicity." She smiled. "It's not about you. It's about the people coming together around your food." That got me. So I said yes. The segment aired the following Thursday. By Saturday, there were 200 people in line. I called in favors. Brought in old friends from my catering days. Even my cousin flew in from out of state to help. He took one look at the crowd and said, "You did this with one cart?" "I did it with one truth," I said. "That people never forget how you made them feel. And no one ever forgets a meal that made them feel seen." A week later, I was offered a lease on a small corner lot. Nothing fancy. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, room for 20 seats. I took it. Called it Taha, after the place that reminded me I was still worth something. And then I made one last call to a lawyer. Not for lawsuits. For trademarks. For protections. For ownership. Because if I was going to rise again, it was going to be different this time. No investors. No vultures. Just roots. I didn't want to be a millionaire. I wanted to build something that couldn't be stolen. And that started with fire, sweat, and stories told through flavor. But what I didn't know then was that someone from my past had seen the news story. Someone I hadn't heard from since the day I was erased. And he was coming. Not with congratulations, but with a warning. It was a Tuesday afternoon, slow between lunch and dinner, when he walked in. I was in the back prepping onions when Rosa, our hostess, poked her head through the swinging kitchen door and said, "There's a guy out front asking for you." Says he's Adrian. I froze. There was only one Adrian I knew from that chapter of my life. The same guy who used to be Owen Farley's right hand. He was the one who drew up the early partnership docs, ran our marketing campaigns, and negotiated supplier contracts. Quiet, efficient, polite to your face, until he wasn't. The last time I saw him was the day before my keycard stopped working. I wiped my hands, pulled off my apron, and walked out front. And there he was, clean-shaven, suit jacket slung over one shoulder, sunglasses hanging from the collar of a button-up that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to. But his face was thinner, harsher, more tired. He extended a hand. "Marcus." I stared at him. "You've got 5 minutes." He nodded, followed me out to the sidewalk, and leaned against the building. I saw the news. Taha. The comeback. "It's impressive." "Cut to the chase," I said. "What do you want?" "Owen's in trouble," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Good. He's under investigation," Adrian continued. "Securities fraud. Embezzlement. The works." I folded my arms. "So he's finally choking on his own silver spoon." "He's also trying to shift the blame," Adrian said. "He's been naming names. Saying you knew about the financial discrepancies. That you were part of it." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course he is. The investigators might contact you," Adrian added. "I thought you should be prepared." "Why are you really here, Adrian?" I asked. "You never warned me when I was being pushed out. You never said a word when they erased me from my own company." He looked away, then back. "Because I was scared. Because Owen had me tied up in too many deals. I didn't think I could afford to burn that bridge." "And now?" I asked. "Now it's on fire anyway." He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "What's that?" "Everything," he said. "Emails, files, contracts. Records of what Owen did. What we did. Including your forced removal. He falsified your exit paperwork. Claimed you breached fiduciary duty. It was all a lie. And this clears me? It proves you were cut out with cause manufactured after the fact. If the SEC or the feds come sniffing, this protects you." I took the drive. "Why give it to me?" "Because I should have stood up then. And because if you go down, Owen gets one more win. I can't let that happen." "What about you?" "I'll testify if needed. I'm already cooperating." I studied him for a moment. "You're trying to redeem yourself." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I'm just tired of the way that world smells." He turned to go, but paused. "Your place smells better. Like something honest." I didn't respond. Just watched him walk away. That night, I stayed late after closing and plugged in the flash drive. He wasn't lying. The files were all there. Invoices, memos, chat logs, evidence of how they maneuvered me out, shifted funds, used my face to build hype, and then dumped me like spoiled milk. I emailed everything to my lawyer. Then I sat alone in the kitchen, in the stillness, and realized something I hadn't dared to believe until that moment. I was free. Not just in spirit, but legally, publicly. I could reclaim my name. My brand. The next morning, my lawyer filed a statement with the SEC and connected with the lead investigator on the case. I gave a deposition. Quiet, calm, thorough. And for the first time, I felt the weight lift, not because someone was finally listening, but because I had finally spoken. A week later, I got an unexpected email from the editor of a major food and culture magazine. Subject line, profile request, from Ghost to Firebrand. They wanted to do a feature on Taha. Not as a comeback story, but as a rebirth. I said yes. The interview came with a photographer, a whole crew. They spent a day in the kitchen, asked questions, took notes. When the piece dropped, it blew up. They called me the chef who got stolen, then started cooking for himself. People started flying in from out of town just to try our tacos. We sold out 3 nights in a row. My cousin said, "You're gonna need a second location." I said, "No. We build one right. Then we grow." But I couldn't shake the thought that Owen still hadn't called, hadn't written, hadn't faced me. And I realized I needed that moment. I needed to look him in the eye, not for revenge, for closure. And then one day, he came to me, not in person, in court. A letter arrived. Summons. Owen Farley was suing me. Defamation, misappropriation of brand, and breach of a non-compete that was never even legal. It was petty, desperate, but dangerous. And I knew then, the final battle wasn't in headlines or food carts. It was in the courtroom. And this time, I was ready. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I've worked in kitchens long enough to know this. The best dishes are served with fire. The kind of fire that takes raw truth and sears it into something unforgettable. That's exactly what I brought into the courtroom. Owen Farley's lawsuit was a last-ditch effort, a gasping move by a man watching his empire slide into the gutter. He claimed I had defamed him, violated a non-compete clause he knew wouldn't hold in court, and accused me of damaging Plated Roots' long-term brand equity. The same brand he gutted the second he erased me from it. My lawyer, Linda Reyes, was calm, sharp, and ruthless in the way only a former corporate counsel with a moral compass could be. She filed our countersuit before his subpoena even reached my front door. Wrongful termination, fraud, and malicious interference with my professional reputation. It wasn't just a defense. It was a war plan. And we had ammunition. Adrian's flash drive became our holy grail. The falsified documents. The internal memos. The email where Owen literally wrote, "Marcus is a placeholder. Once we rebrand, we dump him clean." Linda nearly laughed when she read it. "He buried himself with his own words," she said. The trial didn't attract major press at first, until the second hearing, when Melanie, the journalist who had first covered my story, published a follow-up. From Stolen Startup to Street Stall King, Marcus Rivera's Road to Justice. After that, the courtroom had people in the benches. Food critics, business columnists, even a few influencers who once promoted Plated Roots now posted threads about corporate exploitation and integrity in branding. But I didn't care about the crowd. I cared about the man sitting across the aisle, smug in a tailored suit, who still thought he could win with a handshake and a headline. Owen didn't testify the first day. His lawyer tried to claim the contract I signed gave him full rights to the brand, even my face. Linda stood up with one sentence. "The contract was altered. We have the original." That shut the whole line down. The judge, an older woman with eyes like scalpels, nodded and moved on. On the second day, Owen finally took the stand. He tried to charm, talked about vision and disruption, and how Marcus was compensated appropriately. Then Linda stood up. "Mr. Farley, do you recognize this email?" She held up a printout. Owen squinted. "I might. It's from your personal inbox, dated 3 weeks before Mr. Rivera's dismissal. You wrote, quote, 'Marcus is a good face, but too sentimental. I need a CEO, not a street chef.'" He shifted in his seat. "Business decisions are often. And did you authorize the removal of Mr. Rivera's shares from the cap table without board approval? That's not how I would characterize. Yes or no?" He hesitated. "Yes." "And were you aware that the clause in the contract used to justify his termination was inserted 6 days after the signature date, and the document was then re-uploaded to your servers as the original?" Owen's jaw tightened. "I need to review. Would you like to hear a recording of your co-founder explaining how you did it?" That's when Owen broke. He asked to speak with his attorney. Court recessed. The next day, he didn't return. His lawyer requested a settlement conference. Linda turned to me and whispered, "We've won. But how far do you want to take this?" I looked around the courtroom, at the press, the cameras, the people watching. Then I said, "All the way." And we did. 2 weeks later, the court ruled in our favor on all counts. My name and likeness were officially, legally, and irrevocably severed from Plated Roots. They could never use my story again. I was awarded damages, a public retraction, and, most importantly, full rights to the recipes, marketing assets, and video content I had created during the early campaigns. But that wasn't the real win. The real win came the next night. I was back at Tahoe. Friday evening. The patio was full. A woman in her 60s waved me over. She said she drove from San Diego just to try the tacos. Her husband had cancer, and he used to watch my cooking videos when he couldn't sleep. She said it made him smile. Said I made food feel like home. I smiled and gave her a plate on the house. Then I went to the back, stood alone for a moment, and just breathed. Not money, not headlines, just peace. My phone buzzed. A message from Adrian. He's moving to Dubai. Figures. I laughed. Then another message popped up, this one from Rosa. A new catering inquiry. Private dinner. Small guest list. Big name client. But I wasn't sure. That life, catering, servitude, pleasing people from behind curtains, felt like another world. Then I looked again. The name on the booking was a non-profit. They were feeding homeless veterans. Needed a chef. A real one. Someone who understood community. I accepted. That night, I walked outside the kitchen, stood under the string lights on our patio, and stared at the city that had once swallowed me whole. Now, I was feeding it back, one plate at a time. They tried to take my name, my work, my voice. But what they forgot, what they always forget, is that you can't cancel fire. You can only contain it. And eventually, it burns its way out. 6 months after the trial, I stood in front of a building I never thought I'd own. It wasn't flashy, no rooftop bar, no valet, no imported tile, but it was mine. A low-slung, wide-open space with big front windows and a wraparound kitchen visible from every seat in the house. The sign above the door simply read Fuego. Not in gold. Not neon. Just hand-painted steel on wood. Fire, plain and simple. Because that's what built me. That's what tested me. That's what was never taken. The grand opening wasn't a red carpet event. There were no celebrities, no influencers, no paparazzi. Just people. My people. Customers from Taha, kids from the neighborhood who used to stop by my taco cart after school, families who remembered when I cooked in a food stall with borrowed propane and folding tables. Rosa was managing the front now. My cousin ran operations full-time. Arturo and Lupe were our guests of honor, seated at table 1 with plates already refilled twice. When I walked out from the kitchen, apron on, sweat on my brow, the entire room stood up and clapped. I didn't know what to do with that. I'd spent so long trying to be invisible, to be efficient, quiet, useful. But this time, I stood there and let the sound hit me. It didn't feel like fame. It felt like arrival. The first dish served was my abuela's mallets, toasted bolillo bread with beans, queso, and pico. Simple. Poor man's food. But people cleaned their plates and came back for more. Halfway through the night, a man in a business suit walked in. I tensed. For a split second, I thought Owen had flown back to try and crash this too. But it wasn't Owen. It was the lawyer from the investor's side, one of the guys who helped get Plated Roots. He didn't look smug this time. Just tired. Maybe regretful. Do you have a minute? He asked. I walked over, arms crossed. You have some nerve. He nodded. I know. I came to say you were right. We didn't believe in the cook. Just the product. We forgot there was a man behind it. You forgot a lot of things, I said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a card. We're trying to build something new. No strings. Real equity. We could use someone like you. I looked at the card. Then I dropped it in the tip jar and walked away. That night, after we closed, I sat on the counter and watched the team clean up. Not employees' family. Survivors. Builders. Adrian called that night. He was consulting now. Quietly. Ethically. Helping creators protect themselves from people like we used to be. You really did it, he said. You turned the ashes into something. No, I said. I just stopped trying to be what they wanted. Started being what I was born to be. And what's that? Hungry, I said. Not for money. For meaning. I hung up and turned off the lights. The next morning, the reviews came in. Not 5-star fluff from paid bloggers, real ones. Best birria I've ever tasted. Feels like home. Chef Marcus reminds us what food is for. I stood in the doorway of Fuego that afternoon and watched the line form outside. People. Patience. Purpose. I didn't need a launch party. I didn't need a millionaire title. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. Because I had the one thing they could never manufacture or market. I had truth. And I had fire. I became a millionaire once and lost it all. But this time, I built something they couldn't buy, break, or steal. This time, I didn't just rise. I earned the sunrise.